On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Bobby Touran. He is the CEO and co-founder at Rainbow. We're going to be talking about non-technical founders and actually being really comfortable with applying engineering best practices. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to talk to Bobby about his background and how he has a very strong relationship with the engineering team. He is a non-technical founder. And we're going to talk about how he actually helps foster the company culture and how that translates into that engineering culture for his team. We're going to talk about being back in the office. So for Bobby and his team, that's been really important. We're going to talk to him about why, and we're going to talk to him about how that collaboration is helping the business just grow in other ways that maybe were not anticipated or maybe were anticipated. We'll have Bobby tell us all that stuff and more. Bobby, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Amir.
Absolutely. Before we start, can you tell everyone what you guys do over there at Rainbow?
So we're a specialty insurance underwriting company. We help businesses get insurance. We're highly specialized in the types of businesses that we focus on. Some of our areas of focus include insuring restaurants. It includes focusing on insuring beauty salons, fitness studios. These are businesses that all are required to have insurance. And we use technology to make it easy for agents to purchase the insurance from us. We build all that software ourselves. And then we also build software to help evaluate the risks so that we make sure that we're both keeping out the bad risks, the ones we don't want, but also making sure we're giving the best price and insurance value to the risks that we do want.
Fantastic. All right. So this episode, we're going to be talking about being a non-technical founder and really still working very closely with engineering, establishing engineering best practices. So obviously you have mentioned that you are a non-technical founder. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with engineering, given the fact that you might be a little bit less technical than maybe a CTO co-founder or somebody similar to that.
Yeah, I would say I'm a lot less technical than somebody like that. I've been a founder now for almost 20 years. The majority of that has been spent starting businesses that are software enabled. And so this is a role that I've had to being a non-technical founder in technical companies is a role I've had to get really comfortable with. I sort of scratch the itch because I love to think about building things by being founder-led in the sales that we do early on, and then translating that into sort of functional requirements at the product level. But I've always partnered with a technical co-founder. I've either as a product manager, depending on the structure of the company, or between other companies I've probably been in organizations representing close to 100 software engineers at this point. It's a dynamic that I've become really comfortable with. What I've found is it's really important to give any engineer you're working with as much context for like why you want to do certain things on the roadmap or why you think about the architecture in a particular way. One example of that is that we're based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and my co-founder, who is technical, who's also based in the Bay Area, and I really wanted to have a hybrid engineering culture. We knew it would be tough to get it. We started the company about 3 years ago. We knew it'd be tough to get everyone in the office 5 times a week, 4 or 5 times a week, but we thought at least a couple times a week. And that was really important because since we're combining a very specialized industry, which is insurance, with a topic that is not usually thought about in the context of insurance, which is software development, we find that it's very helpful for the engineers to be able to hear the way the business talks about things just in the normal course of business. And that really gives a lot of color and a lot of context to the features that they're building.
I guess to kind of go back, and I mean, thank you for giving us the context. And when you're looking at that relationship, and obviously, as one of the founders, company culture, you guys are going to imprint that, and you're going to have your personal views of how companies should be run. It's your company, you're founding it. So as you kind of have grown to understand the engineering side, and you are looking at your company culture, how do you help align that to building with your technical co-founders a healthy engineering org?
I think, first of all, it's important to recognize that the culture is not something that you define and it sort of is what it is. It's something that we very actively work on. the culture is sort of going through ebbs and flows at any time in the company within the engineering work, for sure. It's unique because the engineering, we have about 25 employees and we have a 10-person engineering unit, but the engineers are the only team members who actually see each other in person a couple times a week. Everyone else is remote. So it's actually really timely. We just got back from our company offsite. We do 2 of those a year. And that's a really important time for the engineering and non-engineering parts of the company to interact with each other. We really recommend that people sort of at the meals and at the activities sit next to not the people who they work with every day. Because again, I find that context and just like knowing who the other person is, who you're getting info from, is so helpful. It also sort of like fosters more comfortable, natural communication. That, one of my favorite things is when I see engineers working on a story that they're working on as part of the roadmap, and they know who in the organization is the best person to give them sort of subject matter expertise. That's sort of like one nice win. And then another nice one is when the engineer, reaches out to that person to have a direct convo about that. And, the engineer is not waiting until like the next product planning meeting to do that, because that's going to make the culture move, or the velocity move a lot slower. It's just generally, we like to find personalities from an engineering and non-engineering perspective for people who just have a bias for action. They want to move things along. We find that attracts really good talent. So those are just like some ways. We also use different tools like that. There are so many good tools out there that like we use this thing in Slack called Donuts that sets up like recurring meetings with randomly paired people. The team said that that's really helpful and really interesting for them. So those are some of the things we do. And then we also have a biweekly all hands meeting where we, as the name implies, everyone comes together. We talk about sort of the business wins, and then we talk about the engineering wins. And having the opportunity for the engineers to hear how the non-engineers react to what people are excited about and vice versa, we found is really effective in creating those more unexpected opportunities for both groups to sort of mesh with each other. Those are really like some of the key elements of the culture I think that we see sort of practically. I would say at a higher level, we have values that we've defined. We define them as a company. We really talk about trying to live our values. We're always open to feedback from team members, and we're always looking to sort of evolve, the way we interact with each other.
You mentioned it's very important for your engineers to be comfortable with the why, and part of hearing you talk about the way you view your relationship with engineering as the non-technical founder, as somebody who's has to have a healthy relationship with engineering. Is it your job? Is it maybe the technical co-founder's job to help the engineers understand that why? Do you work together? How do you actually help the team kind of buy into the why of the org?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have a third co-founder. He's our head of product, and he plays a really important role because he is not classically trained as an engineer, but he's like very technically minded. And he is very close to sort of the key business objectives based on his interactions with me. And so he and our head of engineering, they sort of collaborate a lot to make sure that there's general alignment with the why, basically, that's being communicated to the engineers. I would also say it's something that we are, again, like we're always trying to emphasize the why. We have to repeat those points a lot. We find that that's really important. I think a mistake that I've seen other founders make, or that I've made earlier in my career, is they assume because something's been said once, like, knowledge has effectively been transferred. And I find that is like, that could not be further from the truth. I think it might depend on what you're building as a company. Like if you're building tools for other engineers, like you're building true software for other engineers to consume, maybe that's a little bit different. But in any kind of a company where software is augmenting what was historically a human-enabled process, you really do need that continuous dialogue between the technical and the non-technical folks. And then from my perspective, what I try to do is because I'm really laser focused. I'm not as involved in product development at all. And instead, all I'm doing is thinking about sort of the big picture direction of the company. I try to multiple times a week have touch points with my technical co-founder and my head of product, just to make sure that we're all really aligned on what is like the latest, most important thing to be focusing on. And then they're communicating that in their own ways, either in the one-on-ones that they have with their engineers, or in the sprint planning meetings, or in the sprint retros that we have. That's really where the rubber meets the road for us in terms of that sort of engagement.
And you mentioned that having people close to each other to understand how the industry works, understand some of the concepts. There's nuances to the area you're in, obviously within insurance, but obviously there's nuances within the niche that you're working in. When you were looking at that frequency of being back in the office, how have you seen candidates respond to that? For the reasons that you have, I mean, you have valid reasons. Obviously, I like them, but I guess when candidates got comfortable with working remotely consistently, there might be a pushback. I was kind of curious, what you've heard, what you've seen, and how maybe you've handled that.
So one thing is that, so we started the company in January of 2022. So we actually just hit 3 years that we've been in operations. And when we were starting, it was even closer to COVID, closer to like, when the big outbreak and everything, the whole experience. Obviously, we still live with COVID today, but like at least what we were reading online was that people are just like universally against going in person. But kind of for that reason, we really wanted to make the requirement to come together, and the number has always been twice a week. We really wanted that to sort of serve as a way to help us filter out like who's going to be a good fit, I guess, from a culture perspective. So that was actually kind of, in a way, an unintended benefit of having that as a requirement. There were a lot of people who were just not going to be interested. And so in a way, we could be kind of more focused in who we engaged with. I would say, too, that we found lots of engineers so we found folks who are comfortable being in person. We also, from that pool, found people who had been at companies that had gone fully remote. And at that point, many companies had already made the point, we're never going to return to the office. And there was definitely a significant number of engineers who were like, I actually really like going to the office a couple times. Like I like the freedom to work from home, but I like getting out of the house. I like the social interaction. A lot of my friends came from my job, and now I don't really have that the same way because we don't see each other. So again, like I would say that the in-person component has actually been a very meaningful contributor to culture. And then we try to like actualize a lot of the work that we do for the engineers, in the sense that like, so we insure restaurants, and we every couple of weeks we'll go do a team dinner at a restaurant that we insure. And it's actually a really fun experience because everyone's sort of like constantly looking around the room. They're like, oh, like, look at like, the sprinkler system here, or like this one is kind of in a sketchy neighborhood. Why did we underwrite this? And you'll be at the meal, and engineers or team members are slacking, like the underwriting team being like, hey, how did you think about this risk? Like, should we have done something different from a risk evaluation perspective? That's really nice. And I think it's like a unique way to kind of again, add meaning to the work that they're doing, and sort of giving them more context for why it's nice to be in person. I think it also doesn't hurt that here in the Bay Area, we have obviously a density of a lot of really talented engineers. Those are some of the things we've observed from having people in person. And we haven't yet lost anyone on the team like who joined and then was like, oh, actually, I didn't really want to be in person, so I'm going to leave the company. That's not happened yet. So it hasn't happened so far.
All right. I love it. That's great insight. And I think there is a lot of value in what you mentioned and in that collaboration piece, obviously. So obviously you mentioned that you guys have a lot of collaboration, and you have a chief product officer, you have a technical co-founder, and yourself, three founders. When you guys are looking at areas of the business and opportunities for growth, at what level is that happening? Are you guys focusing as founders, making that decision are you guys, being a very small team in an office, are you guys actually trying to bring in some of the engineering team to understand what technical things are feasible to add to the roadmap? Where's that collaboration kind of happen?
Yeah, so a couple things about like just context on us that maybe is helpful too. So this is the second business that I've started within this industry, and the previous one was also sort of technology driven as like the differentiator. And so I've just personally spent, the better part of 10 years now thinking about, what is the state of the art in terms of software? How is it used? What are the opportunities? And I would say that like the opportunities, it's one of the nice things about insurance, frankly, is that it's not like such a moving target. Things aren't like constantly evolving. It's really not like AI where every 2 seconds you have to completely rethink your whole worldview. Insurance kind of is what it is. And I think that's nice because you can sort of lay out these foundational pieces and tell the engineers sort of, and just the team more broadly, hey, here are the business decisions we want to make. What do you want to think? For any major business or even minor business decision that would impact the roadmap, all three of the co-founders of the company, myself included, are involved in those conversations. And each of us try to represent like the voice of that practice group or the department. And then we have a dialogue with our team. And the other thing I'll say is from the engineering team perspective, our engineering team is quite experienced. So we don't really have anyone on the team who this is their first job being a full-time engineer. We don't have any recent grads. I would say on average, every engineer on our team has at least 6 or 7 years of work experience, sometimes at like a major tech company, or sometimes at startups. And we have some on the team who have quite a bit more than 7 years of experience. And so why I think that's important and why that's nice is because, there's this like awareness. There's like a hunger to solve problems, but there's this awareness that you need to sort of be thoughtful about how you do things as an engineer. Like we really spend time thinking about technical debt and like how are the decisions we're making now going to create challenges for us down the road. And we could always be spending more time on these things too. Obviously, in a startup, time is your most precious resource. But we're really trying to be thoughtful, and I think a lot of that starts from just like the pedigree of the individuals. So in that sense, and I'm trying to think of an example where we had a business requirement where engineering was really like outspoken about thinking that was not a good idea. And I can't like saying like we're like objectively against doing that. I can't really think of an example. I think a lot of that, again, though, has to do with the fact that before something gets to them, it's sort of going through the mind and the processing of the head of product and the head of technology. And those are my two co-founders. So I really think that like that leadership team dynamic is what has helped us be successful with engineering culture so far.
Interesting. I guess when you guys are looking at areas of the business as the co-founders and having that dialogue, as you're kind of evaluating business opportunity, maybe other areas you could branch the business out into, that due diligence, that process is always interesting because everybody has a different threshold of how much information or how much confidence they need to make a decision. In terms of like just when you are looking at the roadmap for the business, talk to us a little bit about that thought process, the confidence needed. Obviously, no one knows for sure when we make a decision, but one's got to be made sometimes.
Yeah, I think this is a little unique to us and maybe our industry, but I feel like there are relatively limited unknown unknowns on the business. There aren't even like a lot of known unknowns. Like the unknowns are mostly, will this be as impactful as we think to the business, less impactful, more impactful? And it's sort of, you're kind of like, you have this rubric, right? Which is like, what should we build? How many points will it take to build it? and how do we prioritize the roadmap based on whatever we think is going to have the most impact for the most critical part of the business. And sometimes we will prioritize things that just end up not driving as much business as we had anticipated, even though they could have eaten up meaningful engineering cycles and points. We want to try to always avoid those things happening because I think generally engineers love to see the tools that they're building in the wild and being used and sort of creating value for the company, of course. And we look for engineers who sort of would feel that way rather than just sort of shipping their code and checking out for the day. So that's not ideal, but I think we also do try to be very transparent with the team. And again, the team is more experienced, and so we're all adults, and we just say like, "Hey, here's our hypothesis. We think this will make a difference for these pretty straightforward reasons. Let us know if you disagree, if you have questions. We'll have a dialogue around that." And then once there is sort of collective buy-in, it's just about starting to work on sort of building and launching that feature. And yeah, with like only one or two exceptions, I don't think we've had too many cases where we've ended up building something that then, like in retrospect, like maybe we should have thought about the prioritization slightly differently.
Interesting. I mean, that's I appreciate kind of giving us a little insight into how decisions like that are approached. Obviously, I think it sounds like it's kind of unique to you guys in terms of other factors that you have to consider. I guess just out of curiosity, maybe final question, as you're kind of in the insurance industry, I was just going to ask you about advanced technologies, about Gen AI, LLMs, just in general. As you're kind of building your business, and obviously you mentioned a lot of things, a lot of variables, is that something that's going to be a variable for you in your business, or are you immune from probably any repercussions or shifts in how business models are going to be looked at within your space?
It's definitely the most popular question in the world, and the insurance industry is no exception. It just as like an aside, again, having looked at like the industry, the incumbent industry perspective on technology over a 10-year horizon, which when you think about insurance is like it's this stuff is measured in dog years. So that's like 1 year in the insurance time space continuum. So it's really not that long, but it's pretty remarkable how much attitudes have shifted towards software. I mean, this is an industry where people still talk about technology and software as IT. We talk about having engineers on staff building our software. Large insurance companies, the ones that sponsor the Super Bowl, they're thinking about those departments as the people that they call when they get locked out of their email or something. I mean, it's like it's a very different mindset, DNA, culture around the role of engineering. But I will say that it's also really dramatically changing. If you go back a couple of years, the big conversation was all about data and analytics, which I know might seem a little not strange, but it's sort of like, oh, how is that what they're talking about in the year 2015? But it was. And now AI is like all anyone wants to talk about. The insurance industry is just packed with repetitive manual tasks that are perfectly suited for AI to augment or fully automate. I think there is a lot of like at the general industry level concern that AI is going to take away all these jobs. And I actually think that is not really correct. I think it's going to really change basically every job. But I think that the number of jobs it's going to take away is frankly overblown. And if it does take jobs away, I think it's going to take like a couple decades for you to really meaningfully see different headcount in the biggest companies. But yeah, we think about it all the time. And I think people have a different expectation for us. In a way, it's almost like sometimes I feel like we get a little bit of like a bad rap. People assume because we're like technology enabled, and that's such a key part of our DNA, that's a key part of my background, that we are going to sort of say, oh, AI and software, and traditional underwriting and good risk selection, and the importance of actuarial analysis and the role of agents, and all that stuff just goes out the window. AI is just going to replace all of that. And frankly, I could not disagree with that more. But there's been so many companies that have been saying that there's this misperception, I think. So we think about how to use AI within each of our different departments, the same departments and the same types of tasks that big carriers are going to have to spend a lot of time, effort, and money on replacing with AI over many years. We're positioned to do sort of like to augment the work that our very lean staff is already doing. And we're already starting to do quite a bit of that. And it's really exciting. It's exciting to see the industry really embrace this.
Absolutely. Bobby, I was going to say thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, giving us your insights. I know we could probably keep digging into various areas, but you got to get back to it. And I did want to ask you, if somebody does want to follow up a question based on what we've talked about on this episode, is there a good way of connecting with you?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to me directly. I really do my best to respond to anyone who reaches out to me. My email is bobby@userainbow.com. And for those of you interested, check out userainbow.com. There's an About Us page. It lists more about our company culture. It shows some of the roles that we're hiring for. As a shameless plug, we are hiring software engineers in the Bay Area. And so yeah, would personally love the opportunity to chat with anyone or find me on LinkedIn, and hope to get to know one another.
Absolutely. We'll definitely include some of those links in the show notes. Again, thanks for being on the show. I really do appreciate your time.
Thanks again for having me, Amir.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think we had a conversation with Bobby about him as a non-technical co-founder relating to engineering, about engineering as best practice. I think he did a great job kind of articulating his role, his involvement, his partnership, and we even dove into collaboration with his co-founders and talking about being in the office. He even shared some thoughts about AI in the future within his space. So please share this episode with somebody else who might find it interesting. I'd appreciate that. Also, like, subscribe, comment, leave the podcast a review. Let me know how we're doing. I'd appreciate to hear from you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.